Greetings from Istanbul. Once again, this is Atilla Yeşilara, your friendly host of the Real Turkey channel. It's a beautiful day here. It was a stormy day 2 minutes ago, for Christ's sake. Very changeable weather. Not only in the air, also in Turkish politics and economy. In this episode, I'm going to talk about Turkish economy in 2020. As you might know, our great economy minister, a genius, Mr. Berat Albayrak, has unveiled the new economy program, because these are used to be called medium-term economy plans and sort of like the guideline for the next year. When Ali Babacan was the economy czar, Berat Albayrak renamed them the new economy programs. Same thing, actually. This year's program, which you can find in the chart below in English, see, we provide great service on YouTube, really. We are the only crazies who broadcast about Turkish economy in English, and some people actually watch it. It's very ambitious. Essentially, Mr. Berat Albayrak penned in 5% real GDP growth for the next 3 years, accompanied by ever-declining inflation, which will culminate at 5% inflation by 2022, almost no current account deficits. All of this accomplished at only 2.5% budget deficits, and unemployment will decline steadily throughout the time. This, of course, makes great sci-fi reading. I don't know why Hollywood companies haven't picked this up as their new sci-fi blockbuster. It would certainly crash the gates and sell, millions of tickets, because it has no connection to reality. I mean, it might as well be the new episode of Star Wars. And I want to explain why it won't happen. Why Turkey would never grow 5%, much less 2%. And why Turkey will forever be stuck with double-digit inflation, possibly accelerating inflation, high chronic inflation. The main problem is that the Turkish people have lost faith in Mr. Erdogan. Mr. Erdogan had a magic wand for 15 years, like Harry Potter. The one wand, or the first wand. Whatever he touched turned gold. He delivered uninterrupted prosperity. Call it luck, call it genius, I don't care. But each year, most of the Turks, including opposition members, have felt richer. So people started believing whatever he said. With the mid-2016 coup, his wand turned limp. He lost his golden touch. Since then, Turkish economy grew for a few quarters, but mostly just stagnated. And slowly, even his truest believers started believing that, well, the old magic is dead. And then he started making big political errors and turned more authoritarian than ever, which also killed people's feelings, sentiment towards him. And for the last years or so, Turkey essentially has been in a recession, and a majority of people felt poorer. And right now, and poll data confirms that, roughly 60% of the people think within the next years, Turkey will get worse, and 70% of the people blame the government for that. And that is the gist of the problem. If you don't have trust in the future of the economy, you don't buy houses. You don't take out a consumer loan to buy a car or renew your house or the furniture. You don't get married. You don't take expensive vacations. So that's the first problem. The second problem with growth is that you don't have any drivers of growth. And take a look at the charts, by the way, which I introduced throughout the video, which sort of goes to verify the figures and facts I'm throwing at you. Turkey has never been an export-driven economy, but exports would presumably play a big role in this 5% GDP growth. But as of September, Turkey's export growth stagnated. I think it has been 3 years since export growth came to a complete standstill. On the other hand, imports are still very slow, but because Turkey is completely energy dependent, energy import dependent, some growth is inevitable and imports start growing again. Also, Turkish producers have completely ran out of their inventories, so there must be some restocking. So no export growth, and with EU potentially entering a recession next year, there will be very little to come by. Domestic consumption makes up roughly 60% of GDP, and there is no hope there, for a very simple reason that by July, non-farm unemployment reached 16%. With construction dead and real wages not growing at all, it's very difficult to generate new consumption. Private sector doesn't generate enough EBITDA to invest, and it's stuck with this FX debt, the Turkish lira value of which increases by the day. And the first priority is to close bank loans and to pay off FX debt. So they won't be in any shape or mood to invest into new machinery, equipment, and factory. And without investment, you can't become more productive. If you're not investing, you are not hiring either. According to IMF definition, Turkish budget deficits are roughly 6% of GDP. Turkey can't borrow abroad. If the treasury borrows at home, it crowds out private sector. The central bank has maneuvering room. Even though some people don't find the inflation numbers credible, I don't want to, touch that with a 10-foot pole. Inflation is 10%, policy rate is something like 17%. So it can cut policy rates further, but the banking system is paralyzed because it has bad loans of 6% of the portfolio. It has risky loans of another 12%. So banks perceive credit risk as very high, and they don't want to lend anymore. Even if they do, companies don't want to borrow anymore. So the credit mechanism through which monetary policy is transmitted has broken down. The government's idea of creating another credit boom to facilitate growth is a joke. It's not working in China. It's not working in India. Credit cycles die of old age, unlike economic cycles, and Turkey is one of the first to go bust, so banks will not lend. I'm looking around, short of a miracle or discovery of a new natural resource, Turkey will not grow. How about inflation? Yeah, when you don't have domestic demand, inflation, of course, will not explode. But when you have a president who thinks higher interest rates lead to higher inflation, flipping economic theory upside down, it is very difficult to disinflate. Mr. Erdogan will order central bank to cut rates until the currency goes apeshit, excuse my French. He has done so several times in the past. This time too, I'm fairly sure, ignoring all the basic realities of economics, he will push central bank to cut interest rates until all foreign investors leave Turkey and all domestic investors switch to hard currency and the Turkish lira drops off the cliff. So, yeah, even if there are no fundamental reasons for Turkish lira to depreciate and thus cause higher inflation, Mr. Erdogan will find a reason. To me, next year, if we're lucky, we'll get 1 or 2% growth, but Turkey will not have an inflation rate below 10%. With this cheery news, your host Attila Yeşilay says goodbye and asks you, if you like it, to share this Real Turkey episode with your friends and or to subscribe. Bye-bye now.